Hi everyone, I'm Samadhi Galpaige and with Matilda Gibbons, we're from Animal Behaviour Live.
We'd like to welcome you to the first of the roundtable discussions, focusing on inclusivity in academia.
At Animal Behaviour Live, we aim to reduce disparities in the representation of gender, race, class, and geographical location that can be met in regular international scientific conferences, as well as reducing carbon emissions.
We also aim to provide an accessible free platform to all scientists irrespective of their background, and we hope that this will help them to share their research, network, and to benefit career progression.
Today, the topic being discussed is accessibility in academic conferences, and we have three speakers joining us who each have experience in advocating for inclusion in academia, and we are really looking forward to hearing their experiences and opinions on this important topic.
So firstly, we'd like to welcome Claire Hann, who is the Equality and Diversity Officer at the University of Oxford and co-authored a best practice guide to organising inclusive conferences.
We'd also like to welcome Ana Silva, who directs the Laboratory of Neuroscience at the Universidad de la República in Uruguay, and is the chair of the Inclusion and Diversity Committee of the International Society in Neuroethology.
And finally, we'd like to welcome Stephen K. Boss, who is a professor of environmental dynamics and sustainability at the University of Arkansas and is interested in equity and inclusion in the geosciences.
So the two questions our speakers will be discussing today are: how do aspects such as finances, language barriers, geographical location, and other factors impact accessibility to international conferences? And what can be done to make conferences more accessible?
So each speaker will have around 5 minutes to answer on their own separately, and then we will have 30 minutes for a debate, and then 10 minutes for questions at the end from the YouTube chat.
So we hope the audience today will have many questions for you. So could we please invite the viewers to ask questions on the chat box as we go, rather than waiting for the end of the session, because it's just going to really help us to make run things smoother.
So whenever you're ready, Claire, if you would like to start.
Well, hi everyone, and thank you very much for this invitation. Before I begin, I just wanted to mention that a lot of what I'm going to say today is based on the guide to inclusive conferences that I produced with a colleague of mine. So these are not all my ideas. It was very much a collaborative effort. And the other thing to say is that I'm mostly talking about in-person conferences at the moment, in the expectation that we will be able to have face-to-face conferences again at some point. So I think it would be useful as well to discuss the value of online conferences in mitigating some of the barriers to access. But for the moment, I'll be talking about mostly in-person events. So to begin, I think it's important to think of accessibility in two ways. So firstly, being able to attend and speak at a conference, so physically being able to be there. And secondly, being able to participate meaningfully in that conference once you're there and to benefit from it. So that's both the formal aspects of the conference, the papers and the Q&A, and also the informal things which are just as important, the networking and socialising opportunities there. So thinking about the first one, being actually able to attend a conference, I think making a conference accessible you need to plan for that right from the start. So there's a lot of practical things that you can think about when planning your conference, including the choice of venue, whether that's accessible, whether you've got additional rooms for people that may need to use them. The timing of the conference is also important. So avoiding national holidays, religious holidays, making sure the conference itself is very flexible in its structure. So for example, not always holding networking events at the end of the day, having some in the middle of the day to help people with caring responsibilities. And it goes without saying, obviously, catering for dietary needs is important. And a good way to capture all this information about accessibility right from the start is to give plenty of space on the registration form for delegates to indicate all their accessibility needs. So whether that's dietary, whether it's to do with caring needs, a learning disability or physical disability, making sure that's all captured from the beginning so you can make provision for that. And one thing I wanted to mention at this point in terms of a barrier to accessibility, one of the most important ones I think actually is caring responsibilities, and particularly for women. This affects women disproportionately, and there's things that can be done to help women to access conferences. So for example, you might want to consider offering bursaries to cover extra care costs. You could think about providing childcare facilities at the conference, and simpler things to do are simply just to give plenty of notice of the date and time of the conference so that people can plan their childcare or their other caring responsibilities around that. And perhaps to unbundle the ticket price so that people can pay to attend maybe just one day or one part of the conference, whichever is easiest for them to do. So moving on to the sort of participation at the conference itself, it's really important that everybody can participate fully. And it may be that we need to rethink the format of conferences in order for this to work. And I know some people are already thinking about this. So perhaps moving away from the traditional sort of keynotes and panels in a big lecture theatre where it's focusing on the, really showcasing academic excellence, usually from a very senior academic, and maybe giving more opportunities for people who are earlier in their career, people who might not normally have an opportunity to speak at a high-profile conference, to give their views and share their knowledge in an environment which may be more comfortable for them. So it might be a case of having sort of smaller, more interactive sessions, workshop sessions, roundtable discussions, those kind of things, as well as perhaps the more sort of plenary panel sort of events. And when it comes to panels, of course, it's important that those panels are diverse as much as possible. But it's not just a case of ticking a box saying, oh, we've got a woman on the panel, we've got a person of colour on the panel. Those people need to have the same status and the same opportunities as the other members of the panel. So it's about giving them the equal airtime and making sure, for example, you don't always ask the woman or the person of colour to speak at the end or that kind of thing. It's about giving that equality of opportunity there. And talking of language barriers, if a person is presenting perhaps not in their native language, it's useful to provide translators, interpreters, people who can maybe translate questions for the presenter or enable them to answer the question in their own language. So it's about being inclusive to everybody. When it comes to Q&A sessions, research has shown that men are more likely to ask questions after a paper, but that changes if the first question is asked by a woman. And we tried this actually in a conference that we ran in my department a year or so ago. We asked all the session chairs to take the first question from a woman, a person of colour, or an early career researcher. And that visibly changed the dynamic of those discussion sessions, and people commented on it afterwards and said how much it had enabled them to participate, whereas they might not normally have been comfortable or confident to do so. So that can really help. Networking, I mentioned before, that's an important part of a conference. Some people really enjoy it, others find it a source of anxiety. So again, it can be a case of trying different formats, maybe making it a little bit more structured, having a theme for the networking, or offering people the opportunity to arrange in advance a meeting with another delegate to avoid the awkwardness of walking into a room full of people you don't know. So just to finish, another element that I think is crucial in making conferences accessible is clear communication right from the start. So before the conference, having a clear statement on your website or your conference page about your commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion, and make sure you're very clear in your communications with your attendees, making sure they have all the information they need about practical things like the layout of the venue, how to get there, where to go. That can really help particularly neurodiverse participants to feel comfortable with the organisation. And then during the conference, a clear statement in the opening plenary about what you're doing to make that conference inclusive and how the attendees can play their part is really valuable as well. And things like asking the presenters to ensure that their presentations are accessible. So practical things like the font size, the colour, those sort of things which help people with any disability to access those presentations as well. So I think my 5 minutes is probably up, so I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Claire. So let's go over to Anna now.
Great. Thank you very much. Good morning for me, at least. Very nice, your presentation, Claire, very clear. And thank you for having this discussion. It's a very important issue. In contrast to Claire, I will address these questions from my perspective, like to bring you the opinion of a person doing science in South America, and which could be like the perspective we feel or we have felt across the years about these issues. When you do science in the third world, attending international conferences is crucial. And this is a moment in which we do not attend the international conferences just to be updated of cutting edge science, meeting people, make contacts. For us, it's the one opportunity to have like visibility of ourselves and our work, and to compare our work with others, and hopefully to find it's good enough and reinforce the sense of belonging. So while many participants attending meetings, for them is a regular activity, for underrepresented groups, it is a super extraordinary event, and in which it is very difficult to feel like a regular participant. So, for example, my first view of international meetings was that they were like a friend group. I did not belong. And maybe far is kind of the name of the game here, because far in the sense of geographical, because we are always, almost always far away from the place where these conferences are held, but also far in the sense of unknown in the way that do not understand clearly how to register, how to submit an abstract. Also far in the sense of unfamiliar, no friends around. I have attended meetings in which I did not know personally anybody before attending meetings. So this way, science community in the country I come from is small. The interactions with colleagues are scarce, and the scientific budget we have is really poor. It's around $15,000 a year for a senior scientist. And so attending international meetings for us is, for one hand, mandatory and very, very important. On the other hand, is very expensive activity, and we can only afford to attend one meeting per year at most. So from this perspective, the financial barrier and the language barrier are the most important issues. And they can be really worse than imagined. So, of course, I will emphasize this two aspects in the second round of discussion, in which I can give more details that will let you know more specific aspects of this type of barriers that we have to struggle with. And so, in line with this, I would like to I select like two recommendations to make conferences more accessible. One important and very like general is to foster diversity and inclusion, not only in a discursive way. So this is, of course, very important to really mean what is needed to encourage when we are talking about diverse meetings. And the other very important aspect, I think it is a main issue from my perspective, is that international societies are enriched by geographical diversity. And this geographical diversity is would be very much reinforced if meetings kind of be held in different, sometimes distant sites, to have like a more equal distribution of the places in which international meetings are held. And in this respect, I would also like to expand with details my experience in holding meetings, international meetings in my home country in Uruguay in the second round of discussion. That will be all for my first 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. I just also want to remind the audience that we'll be taking questions from the YouTube chat. So if you put any questions that you have in real time onto the YouTube chat, we can then ask them so there's no delay. So if everyone just writes them on the chat. And finally, Stephen.
Thank you, and I want to thank the organizing committee again for inviting me to participate in this very important discussion. I come to this maybe with a little different perspective. And I know we've all been through a very challenging year globally here when we've been facing the global coronavirus pandemic. And in this process, I consider that globally humanity has passed through an event horizon here. And if you understand the concept of the event horizon from astrophysics, you know that you can't go back beyond the event horizon. There's no going back, physically impossible to go back. And so there's some nostalgia for the before times, but I feel like we just need to move forward here. And here we are, connected globally this morning, speaking with each other in real time. I can see you, you can see me. We are essentially face to face at this moment. And so we are accessing each other across multiple time zones and multiple nations around the world all at once. And I really embrace this particular technology. This technology has been with us for some time. Most of us had very little experience with it until this year, but having been forced to use it extensively this year, we're getting quite good at it. And as we get better at it, the technology is going to improve as well, because we're going to demand improvements. And so my consideration is at this point that we may well go back to face-to-face conferences and meetings in the future at some point, although that still seems a somewhat distant future, I think, in the context of the current pandemic. But having demonstrated we can do these virtual conferences as well as we're doing them right now, there's going to be an insistence, I think, from participants and from members of societies worldwide that there's always a virtual option for all these conferences as well. So any live conference is also going to have this ability for live virtual interactions at some point going forward. And I think we should embrace that. That does actually aid participation from many, many people. And one of the aspects of accessibility that I concern myself with, especially and particularly in the United States, being the state of Arkansas, which is one of the more impoverished states in the US, is the cost of attending conferences is extraordinary, and especially international conferences can be quite extraordinary, but the cost of connecting virtually like this is very low. The other aspect of access that's quite important, however, in this context, is that not everyone has access to high-speed broadband internet connections. And so that's going to be something very necessary that we have to do. And I use the analogy oftentimes when I speak of this in my own country. In the 1950s, the United States engaged in a program to build a nationwide interstate highway system so we could transport goods and services back and forth easily across a very large country. And I think what we need now is a revolutionary internet highway system worldwide that's accessible to everyone, provides broadband, high-speed internet access to everyone, no matter where you are, at minimal cost or no cost, if we can do that. And I think we can do that if we sort of put our minds to it, if we have the will to do it. And that engages many, many more people. The other aspect of this, I think, is interesting. When I teach my courses now remotely at the University of Arkansas, I usually broadcast my slide decks using Google Slides. And you're probably aware you can actually close caption in real time using that, and also doing PowerPoint. How would it be if I could close caption my speech right now? I'm speaking to you in my native tongue, English. But if I could close caption this and it translated automatically, and you saw it in your native tongue, you saw my words in your native tongue scrolling across the screen, I think we have the technology to do that and the capabilities to do that. And with advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning, it'd be easy to code this for almost any language. So it would translate almost instantaneously in real time. So there'd be very little delay. One of the remaining challenges of this meeting virtually is just time zones, right? We're meeting across multiple time zones now. I know at least 5 time zones that I know of, just looking at the people on the screen I can see right now, but the people on YouTube right now, I have no idea where you may be or what time it is where you are. Thanks for tuning in, whatever time it may be. But that's always going to be a challenge for us. One of the other aspects of accessibility I think is really important from the virtual standpoint is those people who either have anxiety disorders or speech disorders of various kinds. This format provides the opportunity to pre-record a presentation, upload that pre-recorded presentation, and then just be present live to answer questions. And I think that's quite a nice amenity to provide for those individuals who seek it. And then finally, I think I know that responding to some of the discussion from my other colleagues here about the nature of questioning and the nature of women participation, I think the ability to moderate questions as we're doing today and filter inappropriate questions or moderate those questions and recast them in more appropriate terms is a great tool as well to use to make a more inviting and inclusive environment at conferences. I know sometimes, I think you've probably all experienced this before, there can be sometimes hostile questioning from certain members of our demographic, and that can be quite stultifying and exclusive. And I think the ability to sort of modulate a lot of those kinds of questions or recast them into more or less hostile terms makes for much more accommodating and inclusive environments as well. So those are kind of my thoughts right now as we sort of evolve in this particular mode of meeting. And I really like this. I didn't like it at first very much, but I've gotten really good at it, as we all have. And I really favor this now as a presentation mechanism. It's easy for me to come on a meeting anywhere in the world without having to travel and make arrangements for travel, which is very difficult at the present time anyway. And the cost of this is virtually nil. So I think this is the way to go for the future. I'm a strong advocate of really pushing the limits on this technology and really innovating in this as much as we can.
Thank you so much for that. Everyone made such good points. So I think now we can go ahead with the discussion. So yeah, we'll go off. Thank you.
So I think we should begin the discussion among us. And one point, I really like your presentation, Stephen. And I was a bit concerned only in one aspect, because I'm here as this the perspective of South America, or an underrepresented group in international conferences. And my thinking is that virtual meetings do not help people to feel they belong as well as in-person meetings. And that anyway, it's great and it's true that we have been attending to several great talks without spending money in traveling but it is also true that it is very difficult to make questions, to really interact, to have this post-lecture session in which discussions and contacts are done. So I think we have to work a lot in that sense, and do not think that, at least for now, virtual meetings are substituting all the activities we do in in-person encounters.
Yeah, I think I would agree in general with your general sentiment. I think it is somewhat awkward and difficult for us to interact in this mode, although we're getting better at it. And again, I think that's just part of the socialization that we all need to go through in this new mode of communicating. I think that we will get better at this. And I think as we make demands or think about ways to make this interaction feel like we're really more face-to-face and connected personally in the same room together, that will improve over time. I think these technologies will become better. I know I'm already teaching my classes at the University of Arkansas. I present in front of a very large green screen, and I'm standing in front of my students. They can see me full body standing as if I'm in front of them in a lecture hall. And it's not very different than being in the lecture hall. If you really think about it, what was face-to-face anyway? I can see you and you can see me and we're talking. And if you ask me questions, I can certainly respond in real time. You just can't physically touch me. But nonetheless, I think, again, these technologies, we're going to demand that they improve, and they are improving already. There's already been tremendous advances just in this year, as we've kind of insisted on better connectivity and better quality videos and ease of access in various ways. So it can be a great equalizer. And again, I think I'm concerned generally about the economics of this in terms of just the costs, and also the access to high-speed internet for people worldwide, and especially in the developing world. We need to really think about how we create that access for everyone and make it as equitable as possible so people can participate. But I do agree, it is awkward. It's hard for us to get together here, but we do interact this way. And I know going back to the early 2000s, I dabbled for a while. I don't know if many of you can remember this. There was a platform online called Second Life for a while. And it was really kind of a chat platform, but you had avatars that you could adopt and you could interact and you could do all kinds of things on that. And I actually thought of that from my own discipline, the geosciences, as a way to create virtual field trips and be able to take people with disabilities that are unable to go to the field and access difficult field sites to be able to participate almost in virtual reality in real time in field trips like that. So I think the capability to do that really exists already. We haven't really exploited it very much because we haven't had to. But I think in the present context, as we're forced into this mode of operation, we're going to get better and better at it. And I think it'll become more natural and feel more natural over time. So I think that's just a learning process for us. We're not used to it. But as we become more cyber-oriented creatures, I think this will get better, easier and better for us. But I agree in general, it is awkward. And it's difficult to make the same kinds of connections right now, but we'll get better. We'll adapt.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said in your presentation, Stephen, about the opportunities that the kind of the virtual conference opens up for encouraging a wider range of people to participate and be able and comfortable to participate in conferences. And one thing I'd add to that, actually, one other advantage, I suppose, of the virtual world is that the instance of bullying and harassment may decline, because that's something that actually has been picked up before as being a sort of negative side of the conference circuit. And actually we did it when we were preparing our best practice guide to conferences. We ran a survey, and actually a very large number of the respondents said that they had either experienced or witnessed harassment at a conference, which is a very sad reality. So I guess one of the sort of upsides of the virtual world perhaps is, although of course you can get cyberbullying and bullying over social media, but at least it's less likely that will happen. Then on the downside, as Anna mentioned, it's those physical encounters with people, those sort of chance encounters that you might have at a conference, say in a networking session, or or just in the corridor, or after the session's finished, you can perhaps meet someone that you wouldn't otherwise have met. And although obviously technology is changing, I still feel that it can't substitute for that face-to-face interaction and those kind of meetings with people that you might never have come across before. And it doesn't take, it always feels like a bit more forced online somehow, doesn't it? I mean, I know it will probably improve, but I miss that kind of that face-to-face interaction and bouncing ideas off people and sort of really reading their body language and that kind of thing. So it's kind of, pros and cons of the virtual world, I think.
Anna, would you like to add anything to that?
I totally agree with Claire and what she was saying, and also I would like to. It was a very good point Claire made in her first presentation about the really trying to have in organizing even either virtual or in-person meetings, to have all these aspects in mind from the start in which you are planning these meetings. And this is many times the way like organizing committees are not diverse in themselves, in the people that are working in the organization. And that they can have all the good intentions. They can even have read all the guides that have good recommendations. But even though they can miss specific details that you have to have lived this to be to point out. For example, maybe there's no parents or of toddlers in the organizing committee, and you can say that you are going to organize childcare during the conference, but that would not be suitable for the needs of people actually having babies or young children attending the conferences with them. So that is one example. But also, for example, something that really happened to many people in Latin America is something that is weird. It's, for example, when we get some support for travel awards, for example. It's great. This can make us the difference. We can attend this meeting because we have this support. But then the support is not coming before the meeting. It is going to be reimbursed during the meeting or not. Or you are said that, but then when you come to the meeting with no money at all, as it happened to me once, the reimbursement was going to be by bank transfer and after the meeting was ended. And so in this sense, all the information and making the programs that you are developing to promote diversity and participation really suitable for the people that need them. That is one aspect that I would like to emphasize in this discussion.
So I think you raise a really excellent point there, Anna, and I think that one of the aspects of inclusion that I like to emphasize with my colleagues here is that I don't feel like my colleagues are bad people and they don't intentionally intend to exclude anyone. But by the same token, they often don't intentionally intend to include everyone. And it's a subtle difference in mentality and in thought process, I think. But inclusion has to be a deliberate intention. You really do have to give thought to it and think about it on the front end all the time as you're organizing these things. I think you're exactly right. We do need to really think very seriously and hard and reach out to our colleagues across all the demographics that we know about creating inclusive environments for them as well. So I think that's a very good point to bring out, that historically we just haven't really given much thought to this idea, and it does have to be quite deliberate.
I think also it takes effort to find a diversity of speakers. So as Anna was saying, having a diverse organising committee can really help to understand how to make a conference inclusive, and it can also help you to find those speakers that aren't the usual kind of go-to speakers, the usual suspects. You know, it takes effort to find these people that may not even be working in a university. They might be independent researchers. They might be working in developing countries, or they may not be as well known. They may be early in their career, but they still have a contribution to make. So as you say, Stephen, it takes effort to make a conference fully inclusive and to find those, particularly to find speakers that are more diverse. So I think that's really worth bearing in mind as well.
We already have a few questions from the chat if you would like to start discussing them. If not, carry on. But so we have one.
I think Claire was going to say something, maybe. Is that right?
Sorry.
Sorry. Okay, we'll go ahead with the questions then.
Okay. Okay, so somebody's asking, high-speed broadband is available worldwide, and that would be an amazing, but is a longer-term solution. And she wonders if you have any ideas how we can get around the lack of virtual accessibility in the shorter term.
Yeah, so I understand that we do have this limitation, and again, it's quite acute even in the United States. And as we transitioned to remote teaching platforms here last March, we really came face to face with the digital divide in the United States, just in our own country. And I think that this is not a solution that really is as difficult as we think. We have the ability and the technology to do this. We just don't have the will. And so this could happen virtually immediately if we had the will to do it. It's not that hard to do. But the infrastructure that supports this is extensive, but not unknown. And it's not breaking new territory in any way. It's all off the shelf technologies that we know. We just have to have the will to do it, and we have to decide, who's going to promote it and who's going to pay for it initially. But then once it's paid for, how do we continue to subsidize it at an international level? And I really feel quite strongly that if this is a global initiative, it should be a global prospect. And globally, I think those countries that are most able to contribute to this should contribute to it, and it should be provided at I'd like to see it free access for everyone. There's no reason it shouldn't be, because it's a necessary aspect of humanity for the 21st century. But I don't know a shorter term solution. I think we just have to decide we're going to do this and then do it, and it can be done, in just a few years.
We'll go with the next question. Thank you for that. This question is for Anna. How many conferences are there organized in your field in South America?
Thank you for this question. Actually, I will have like a more general answer for this question. It is quite tricky that when we talk about international societies, many times if you think of holding the meeting in another place away from US or Europe, it is very far away, or it's okay. It is meant in the number of members this society have that are more numerous for the Northern Hemisphere, and especially for North America and Europe. But an international society is weird to talk about far, because no location should be far away from an international society which is meant to be diverse geographically. So that is a very important point to have in mind when we organize in-person meetings, that now for sure will be forever hybrid meetings with virtual and in-person parts always. And to think that some location could be far from the society. The society should be global, and nothing is far from one international society. However, for example, I belong to the International Society for Neurotology, which has been meeting regularly for more than 30 years now. And in 2016, it was the first time that the society held its meeting in the Southern Hemisphere. I mean, in Latin America or in Australia, or never away from the Northern Hemisphere. And this is somehow changing. And yeah, now you're in my field, probably I can count several meetings, like the IBRO General Meeting, for example, that was held in Brazil in 2015, and other international meetings that were held in other places of Latin America. But they are really scarce, and only very, very occasionally when you have these opportunities. And in my opinion and experience, when this happens, I had a very good success. It was a very successful meeting in the sense of diversity. Of course, we had less Asian participants than in other meetings, but we had 30% of Latin American participants that were always less than 5% in other meetings. So that is what I think we should look forward and to promote doing, to change the location of the meetings, and to have a very strong local representation in the places in which you are holding these meetings around the world. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you so much, Anna. So another question is for everyone, I think. If future conferences have a hybrid format with a remote attendance option, how do we avoid a two-tier system where those not attending in person cannot really access the full benefits of the meeting?
Well, this will be one of the evolutions of this technology. I think that we'll see is that we're just going to have to figure out how to make that work better. And I think that I can imagine creating a space, a virtual space, where you may see avatars of people, or you may see our actual images on a screen, kind of milling around a large room, and you can just click on individual people as you see them. They may be tagged with their name. You can click on them and get their attention. And start to interact with them directly. I mean, this is, we already can do this. And in Second Life, again, in the early parts of the 2000s, you were able to do this already. Like, the technology to do this already exists. We just have to insist that we start deploying it and using
it. Thanks again. Next question. I think this is for Anna again. Great point about the lack of interaction, but considering the environmental impact of real meetings, don't you think we should invent more innovative methods of inclusion rather than going back?
I am not sure to understand the question. Can you please repeat it or help me to understand it?
I'll just read out the question again. The question says, great point about the lack of interaction, but considering the environmental impact of real meetings, don't you think we should invent more innovative methods of inclusion rather than going back? But I wonder if this is already covered with all the online.
Yeah, I say yes.
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 Now, I'm sorry. Of course, it's a very good point, and I also agree totally that that we should be very selective in the meetings that we hold in person in the future, and these meetings have to be like really very well organized and have to take into account all these recommendations and things we know that make better meetings. Yes, of course.
Okay, another question is, I think this is for everyone as well, what can be done regarding the fact that most international conferences are scheduled according to Western holidays, which makes it hard for non-Western countries to participate because researchers have to carry on their work in parallel?
I think conference organisers should make an effort to ensure that their conference doesn't clash with any national or religious holiday, wherever it might be in the world. I mean, that could be difficult to do in practice, but I think that's an important thing to bear in mind. Sorry, I was going to make another point and it's gone out of my head. Sorry, it's gone.
Okay, I'll pick up on that thread. I think I agree with this entirely, and I think this is part of the intentionality of inclusion that we have to sort of adopt and be thinking about. And I think that when we start organizing conferences, we have to be cognizant that we engage individuals in our communities who represent these various viewpoints and these various cultural attributes, and consult with them on the organizing aspects of these conferences. Again, if we're intentional about our inclusion, it takes effort, but it has to be deliberate, but we can do that. Again, I think this is just an evolution we're going through, is to try and understand and adopt this more inclusive mindset, and how we do include people. Again, we don't intend to exclude anyone deliberately, but we still have to deliberately intend to include everyone. And it's just a different mindset to take on that task, and we have to train ourselves to do that.
I would also like to add to this thread that, of course, this is an important issue. And also, my mission here, I would like to bring you details of things like they happen from this side all the congresses, at least most of them, are held in the summertime of the Northern Hemisphere. And of course, that is a very hard work time in the Southern Hemisphere. It is winter, it is the middle of one of the semesters. So each time we attend these meetings, we have to be like having to deal with organizing our teaching schedules, changing them. And our system actually is like very flexible and takes into account, because to promote our participation in national meetings, it requires to be flexible with our winter schedules. So as far as this can be like the difficulty to be included, we work hard to be included in these dates that are not convenient for our regular work in South America, for example.
So this is an excellent point again, and I want to agree with Anna about this. And again, a part of the deliberateness with which we have to approach inclusivity. I have a dear colleague at the University of Arkansas who's now retired, but she was a demographer by training, and she taught me to always ask 3 questions. And the questions are: 1, how do the structures and foundations that we're operating under arise? Where do they come from? Who benefits most from those structures, and who decides? And I think in the Western science tradition, we all know the answer to this. It's my demographic, quite honestly. And I think what we're encountering right now in this particular moment is that we're trying to understand these foundations and traditions and the systemic and institutionalized aspects of the way Western science is conducted, and who benefits from it and who decides. And we're trying to change that and undo that. And that, again, takes deliberate effort to do that. It takes deliberate intentions to do it. And it takes deliberate acknowledgement of the historical attributes and the sort of colonial attributes of Western science in many ways. If we decolonialize our science and begin to better understand our colleagues from around the world, people of color especially, and their colonial experiences, then we can begin to undo this. But I think we're beginning to acknowledge that these are structures that were formulated largely in the 19th century, and they were formulated with specific purpose of benefiting a particular group of people. And those people are the ones who decide still. But we're trying to undo that. So I think, again, this is a process, and it's going to take time, but I think the awareness of it is important, and then the acknowledgement of that legacy is important as well, as a mechanism to begin to undo it and to try to do things differently.
Thank you for that. Next question. Do you think at this stage every virtual meeting should be free of charge?
My personal view is I think it should be for attendees, but we've had a debate in our department actually about whether we should pay speakers if they're speaking online, because obviously they've not had to travel anywhere, they're just in their homes often. But you know, it seems wrong not to offer them some sort of financial remuneration for giving up their time, potentially if they've got children having to pay for childcare while they speak at the conference. So there was a debate about you know, whether we should be offering an honorarium just to speakers when they're speaking at a virtual event. So I don't know whether others have views on that. But I certainly think for attendees, it ought to be free to attend a virtual conference.
Yeah, this is a bit of a challenging question. And again, for scientific societies to organize conferences like this, while it doesn't cost much to come in and be online virtually like this, there are costs involved. There's a licensing for Zoom, for instance, or whatever platform you may be using. There's labor involved in this. I mean, the organizing committee here has spent a lot of time, I'm sure, putting this together and thinking about the logistics of it and trying to organize it and set up the infrastructure that we're using right now. And labor has value. And that labor needs to be compensated at some way, in some form. And the international society is also, you know, one of the ways that they derive resources that lets them operate year to year is from the fees they charge for conferences in various ways. So I don't think you can get away from charging fees outright, but I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that not everybody has the same access to wealth or the same access or ability to pay those fees. And we need to maybe think about sliding schedules of various kinds. I know I belong to a couple of societies where they have reduced fees for membership for members who are in developing countries in various ways and various kinds and different categories of fee structures for people in different students pay different fees than say faculty do, et cetera. And I think that that's equitable to think in those terms and just try to extract from people what they may be able to offer, but understand that not everybody can offer the same financial aspects to these things. So again, it's a difficult challenge, and the kinds of things we need to be thinking about as we think about inclusion more broadly and more deliberately. But again, these aren't things we can't figure out and solve. We just need to recognize them and think about them.
I would like to add also to this thread that some societies I work on are already thinking in kind of optional fees. I mean, international societies need to do fundraising. All the programs that they support cost money, and in many of them, the membership fees do not cover the programs, the support for the programs they promote. So it is very important to have income from the scientific activities they organize. And also, it is interesting to know that many people cannot make donations because donations have like a legal structure or organization that is not allowed for people to do with grant money, for example, or from institutional money. On the other hand, to pay a registration for a meeting is something that it is perfectly allowed to do with your institutional money. So if you, my opinion would be that if you give the information about why the society needs money, why it is good or it is important to charge a fee, and to have like the fundraising to promote different programs, then the virtual meetings should have an optional fee. If you are one member that you can pay for this, you pay. If not, no, you don't pay at all. And I guess that many members would decide to pay their registration because they will be confident that they are supporting the activities of the society in a way they can do it by paying this registration fee. So this is my opinion on this topic.
Thanks so much. Next question is, although the opportunity to attend online conferences has made them more accessible to me, I agree with the lack of networking opportunities at online conferences, especially at larger ones. So what do you think? Are online conferences overall giving us more or rather less opportunities?
So I think in this mode, it is somewhat more difficult to make connections with people and to maintain those connections. But partly that's because this is new and we're just learning how to do it and we're not that good at it yet. I think we'll get better. I think conferences will create, going forward, better networking opportunities. I think the way to do it right now is you have to be pretty aggressive and thoughtful and deliberate. If you want to say, reach out and connect with me after this conference, you're going to have to find my contact and send me a contact email or something, excuse me, to get together and we can interact some more on this. Again, that's a little awkward to do at the moment, but I think as we get more practiced and better trained at interacting in this mode, we'll get better at it. And I think those opportunities will get better as well. But again, that's one of the things we can insist on for virtual conferences, that they create better networking opportunities for people, right? That's the thing we can ask for and work to create. It's not something we have to sort of tolerate and say, well, we just can't do it. That's the way it is. It just takes the will to do it.
I think it's probably different kinds of networking opportunities, I guess, with an online conference as opposed to a face-to-face one. So you might actually meet a much larger range of people, because a greater diversity of people are able to tune into that conference because of the very fact that it's online, and for all the reasons we've talked about, making it more accessible. So you may meet a wider range of people in that way, but you might not actually make a real connection with many of them, because you're just sort of meeting them fleetingly, and as Stephen said, you'd have to make a special effort to kind of to meet them afterwards. Or so maybe it's a case of a different type of networking. So you might be able to share the list of delegates with people when they attend a virtual conference. So it might be a case of catching up with somebody after the conference, arranging to meet up with them over Teams or Zoom and have a chat that way, rather than talking around the lunch table at the conference. So it's a different type of networking, I suppose, rather than necessarily more or fewer opportunities.
Okay, so thank you. The next question is, how does one address the problems of busy senior scientists not engaging with participants of different ethnicity? It is common seen to see ethnic clusters in coffee breaks.
So I understand this, and I understand the nature of the question. On the one hand, I would say that those senior scientists, they will eventually pass on, and that problem will kind of solve itself a little bit. But you know, for the time being, I think it's incumbent on us to sort of create this environment and let people know that we want them to be interacting and create reward systems for them to do so at some level. Recognition, at least, that they're working with people of color, or they're working with underrepresented members of their labs more directly over time.
Okay, another question. Are there any pre-conference activities that can help increase accessibility, which you've seen work well? Say making groups of ECR that interact with each other before virtually, so that people already have a group that they can interact with in person at the meeting.
Okay. I think that is a really good idea, and I know of many conferences that do this type of activities, even like courses or school before the actual or the big meeting. And I think that this can be either organized for virtual or in-person meeting, and will improve the accessibility and inclusion of diverse persons in the meeting.
And actually, one idea that I've come across here in Oxford is the idea of randomized coffee trials, which is, I don't know where that came from, but I've heard it used quite successfully. So before the conference or the meeting, participants are allocated into random groups of 3. And then when it comes to the coffee break, they are put into those groups and they get to talk to somebody. So they know they've definitely got somebody they're going to speak to. They haven't got to worry about finding someone to talk to in that huge group where they don't know anyone. And it might hopefully, you know, spark some really interesting collaborations and networks, which you might never have come across before. People tend to seek out the people that are like them, rightly or wrongly, and this is a way of encouraging people to talk to others who they may never otherwise have spoken to. So I think it's quite a fun idea, and it was very popular when it was run at a conference here.
Yeah, for the Geological Society of America, we work with a group there. They have a group, a program called On to the Future, which is intended to attract students from underrepresented groups to the organization. And for that group, we had a virtual, what we call a Newcomer forum. So these are students who've never attended a national conference before, and we bring them into the meeting, and we lined up a number of our colleagues to serve as mentors. We matched them 1-to-1 with students. We had about 80 students, I guess, and we all got together in a Zoom call like this. Essentially had just kind of a general meet and greet type session where we could all sit around and have roundtable discussions, just generally ask various types of questions and get to know the students, and they got to see us live and get to know us. But then we had them matched with a mentor. They could go off afterwards and interact with those mentors as well. So at least they knew at least one person that they would know at the conference that they could reach out to, but also they got to see the rest of us and all the other students in the group too. And I thought that was pretty effective to do that. And I know that at least some of those students are still connected to each other online. They kind of make their own connections with each other through whatever social media platforms they're using. They kind of stay together. So that can work. And again, this is new terrain that we're working in. We're trying to learn how to be cyber beings rather than, physical social ones, I guess. And we're trying to learn how to socialize in this new environment. And I think we're getting better at it. It's still a little awkward, but we will figure out ways to do this and develop the technologies to do it much better than we're doing now as we go forward. And I think it's getting better. And I see this as something very positive for humanity going forward. It makes us really able to connect with anyone worldwide under any circumstances.
I think it's been such a terrific session today. We're coming towards the end of it, but I will ask one last question, which is, are there any specific parts of conferences that you have attended over the last year which engaged you much more than previous in-person conferences? I'm guessing it refers to the online conferences over the past year.
I'll speak for myself. I think I've actually attended more conferences this year than I ordinarily would be able to. And partly because I don't have to go to the entire conference. I don't have to travel to it. And so the costs of travel are excluded, which is a nice benefit, I think. But also the time commitment is somewhat excluded too, because I don't have to go and be on site the entire conference. I can tune into those sessions I'm most interested in and take a couple hours a day or 1 hour a day for several days. Or, it fits my schedule much better to be able to interact this way. And it's less complete in sort of an immersive context. But it allows me to be much more efficient with my time, I think, and attend to things that I really want to see. So for me personally, I kind of embrace this technology, having not been real comfortable with it when we had to do it by force last March. Having done it for the last year, I've come to really enjoy it and embrace it. And I think that there's lots of opportunities to keep doing this and do it much better in the future. So I'm an advocate for this, obviously, and I think we should just keep going. We can't go back, so we have to go forward.
In my opinion, I had attended several meetings, maybe more than I would have attended personally also, like Stephen. But I did good in attending lectures, even giving lectures. It was a good experience for me. In my lab, my students didn't have a good experience in poster presentations. At least for them, for example, they were, in one case, they had no visitors. And in the other case, they had a very awkward discussion about the poster session. So I guess Stephen is right. We need to learn more and to improve the way of interactions.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, speaking personally, I've been to a lot more events and seminars and things than I would normally, because they were always scheduled at kind of 5 o'clock in the evening. And when you've got children, that's just the worst time of day. So I never really was able to attend anything like that. So I've really benefited this year from being able to tune into all sorts of fascinating talks in my kitchen or whatever. But in terms of engaging in the audience, things that I found quite effective are if you can run polls, in Zoom, can't you? And so you can get the audience to kind of participate in that way. And we, for some of our all-staff meetings, things that we have in our own department. We use Vivox, the app, which is another way of submitting questions anonymously, running polls, and we found that engagement has really increased when we started using those sort of things. Whereas before, maybe a couple of men would ask a question. This time we've got perhaps a quarter of the attendees in the audience are asking questions, commenting. They're feeling more comfortable to do so. So I think some of those online polling and question and sort of Q&A tools are really effective, actually, particularly in getting underrepresented groups to participate and have their voices heard.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we'd like to thank the speakers, the viewers, of course, the questions. I have to say this discussion was really fascinating, so many practical points as well. I'm sure many of the viewers today and hopefully in the future will find everything really useful. We'd also like to thank the AB Live, the whole AB Live committee for organising the session as well. And I think we'll end it there with the streaming. So thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. It was really interesting.
How many participants did we have?
Oh.
I think we had around 25 people.
Well, thank you all again for the opportunity to participate today, and I'm happy to meet you, Claire, and meet you, Anna, as well.
Yeah,
and
thank you very much.
Good luck with your research, Matilda and Samadhi and Amandi, and Ebby as well, and Amelia. And Alexis, thanks for your work as well to make this work online for YouTube.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was an honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciated the invitation, and thank you for all the work you put into organising it. It was lovely to meet you all.